At 6, another turbulent day on the financial markets amid more warnings about the UK's economy. The Bank of England raised concerns about the UK's financial stability. The International Monetary Fund warned of a sharp slowdown here next year, and there was this warning for the world.
In short, the worst is yet to come, and for many people, 2023 will feel like a recession.
New figures show the UK's unemployment rate has fallen to its lowest level in nearly 50 years amid a big increase in the number of people leaving the workforce. We'll be looking at all the figures. Also on the programme, a date for the coronation of the King. Charles III will be crowned at Westminster Abbey on Saturday, May the 6th. The nurse accused of murdering or attempting to murder 17 babies. A court is told a pattern had emerged of babies dying or collapsing when she was on duty. Russia has launched more missile strikes against Ukraine, hitting the western city of Lviv and Zaporizhia in the southeast. And Jamie Oliver and the campaign for children from all families in England on universal credit to be allowed free school meals.
And coming up on the BBC News Channel, qualification and elimination from the Champions League can be decided tonight. Celtic need a win to stay alive in the competition as they host RB Leipzig.
Good evening and welcome to the BBC News at 6. It has been another turbulent day on the financial markets after a warning from the Bank of England about the UK's financial stability. The Chancellor, appearing before MPs today, insisted that the government's tax-cutting plans are the only way to boost growth. But the International Monetary Fund repeated criticism of his plans, saying there may be short-term growth, but things would slow down dramatically next year. And the IMF also warned that the global economy is likely to face major challenges, with the worst still yet to come. Here's our economics editor, Faisal Islam.
A sudden rise in interest rates is creeping across the economy, into mortgages and lending rates for companies. The source of the issue remains the market for UK government debt since the mini-budget. And so the Bank of England has once again had to intervene to protect financial stability from a fire sale by some types of pension fund. The new intervention did temper short-term borrowing rates, but the effective cost of borrowing over 30 years carried on rising. These rates remain higher than at the time of the mini-budget. And while 2-year rates were down a little, the existing rise is still filtering into mortgages. Today, the rate for a typical 2-year mortgage fix shot up again. It only reached 6% less than a week ago and is already now nearly 6.5%.
Mr. Speaker,
the Chancellor in the Commons today stuck to his mini-budget plan despite challenges.
Last month, we set out the growth plan, which will focus on breaking out of the high-tax, low-growth cycle that we were currently trapped in. This will put more money in people's pockets and raise living standards for all our people.
Are the Chancellor and the Prime Minister the last people left on earth who actually think that their plan is working?
So, just to pick up on a point, the IMF said today that actually the plan, the mini-budget, has increased the forecast for growth.
At precisely the same time, the Chancellor was praising the IMF's assessment of the UK economy. In Washington, D.C., it was saying the rate shock started with the mini-budget and suggested further reversals of its unfunded tax cuts would help solve the problem.
A change in the fiscal policy would change the trajectory of interest rates going forward, right? Because the expansionary fiscal policy basically triggered a shift in expectations as to what monetary policy is going to do going forward.
It is a rather mixed bag for the Chancellor from the IMF today. Their new forecasts do stress the global nature of the energy shock that therefore affects the economies of Germany and Italy more than the United Kingdom. But here it's also clear that the extra instability in government debt markets that have required emergency action, well, that's UK specific. And the IMF have reiterated the suggestion of further U-turns on government policy. The Chancellor flies in shortly. He'll also face some questions from his fellow finance ministers. These extensive tax cuts for British workers and corporations against a backdrop of an energy shock could lead to the third highest borrowing since World War II and the highest interest rate bill since 1950, according to a separate Institute for Fiscal Studies forecast. So if the Chancellor sticks to his guns, the question remains how to find tens of billions in spending cuts within 3 weeks that are both economically credible and politically viable. Plenty here need to be convinced. Faisal Islam, BBC News at the IMF in Washington.
Our economics correspondent Darshini David is here. Let's talk about pensions first and the risk to them. How concerned should people be about their pensions?
Well, this is an extraordinary amount of intervention we've seen from the Bank of England, but quite frankly, Sophie, they're worrying so that we don't have to. This is a relatively small number of pension funds that are affected. The measures here should give them some breathing space to build up those finances once again. The only concern is, does the bank have to carry on helping out after this Friday when it had intended to stop? But in the meantime, those borrowing costs, a sign of a heightened anxieties, remain very high indeed.
And let's talk also about mortgages, because how long before those borrowing costs start to go down?
Well, investors are worried, aren't they, about the scale and feasibility of the government's plans. We get the next raft of measures from the Chancellor on Halloween. We'll have to wait and see what tricks and treats he has in store for us then. But he has to reassure on 3 fronts. Can he convince that he can boost growth? How is he going to pay for those tax cuts? And can he start bringing the debt down? We may also, of course, see some signs of retreat as well. But if the markets aren't convinced, then borrowing costs stay high. It is those households that will pay the price. 2 million or so are set to remortgage in the next year or two.
Darshini David, thank you. The UK's unemployment rate has fallen to its lowest level in almost 50 years. It dropped to 3.5% over the summer. But the number of people leaving the workforce, either through choice or long-term illness, has hit a record high of more than 9 million. Our business editor, Simon Jack, reports.
The good news is that the unemployment rate is at a 50-year low. The bad news is that means workers are harder to find, which is holding back companies like this Bristol-based waste management company.
Recruitment difficulties are making it harder to take on extra work, and it really limits our ability to grow, which we definitely want to grow. We have so much potential.
They're struggling to hire even after offering a 20% pay rise for some roles. That's not an option in the public sector, which is also struggling to recruit, and where pay rises are below private company offers and well below inflation.
You've got your 2-day shifts of 9 hours each.
Firefighter and union rep Amanda Mills says she understands the attraction of higher paid, less risky jobs.
With our 5% pay offer that we've just been offered, people are wondering how they're going to make their wages stretch. And if they can get employment elsewhere that pays more, there's not much competition, unfortunately.
Although the percentage of those able and willing to work who are not in work has hit a 50-year low, that's partly because the number of people who aren't looking for work has grown to 9 million, a record 21.7% of working-age people. And of that 9 million, 3.6 are between the ages of 50 and 65. 69,000 of them are right here in Bristol, and the council wants to help as many back into work as possible.
That's 25% of that age group. Well, that's a massive waste of talent and skill. It is a problem because that's such a large part of our population that's disengaged. And we have jobs that need doing.
Wages in the private sector and particularly in the public sector are not keeping pace with inflation, which means living standards are falling. But there's another problem. Companies that can't find the workers can't do the work and certainly can't grow. And that is a problem for a government who says their #1 objective is economic growth. Brexit and COVID saw hundreds of thousands of EU workers leave the UK. Migration from non-EU countries has risen, but fewer of the new migrants are work-ready, according to economists.
EU migrants tend to be employed at a rate of about 80%, non-EU migrants at about 60%. That means for a single increase in migration, you get less work-ready people from the type of migration we're seeing into the UK at the moment.
The number of vacancies has dipped from recent record highs, perhaps as more are financially forced back into work or firms give up on hiring. But finding workers with the right skills remains a challenge for companies and the economy. Simon Jack, BBC News, Bristol.
Our Deputy Political Editor, Vicky Young, is at Westminster for us this evening. So the Chancellor's been taking questions from MPs for the first time since his mini-budget. What do you make of the mood of the party right now?
Well, the Chancellor himself being quite careful what he says, because he knows it's not just the markets but his own MPs who need to have confidence in his plan. So he talked today about the country having to live within its means. Of course, what Conservative MPs and others are asking is, well, how are you going to do that? How are you going to make the numbers add up when you've announced all this extra borrowing? And it's making lots of his MPs pretty nervous. There were some pointed questions from his own side, not an all-out attack, but certainly raising some of those issues. One saying, was he going to pay for these tax cuts by taking from the poorest? Another saying he didn't want it to be paid for by cuts to infrastructure in the north of England. And another saying, would you consult with Tory MPs to make sure you can get this stuff through the House of Commons? A reference there to the idea that benefits might not be uprated in line with inflation, something they simply would not be able to get through the House of Commons. So the Chancellor really trying to take his party with him. I'm told that every Tory MP has been offered a one-to-one meeting with him. One thing that will get through the House of Commons tonight is that cut to national insurance, which Labour backs, of course, but Tory MPs warning him that not everything will get through that easily.
Vicky Young, thank you. Buckingham Palace has announced that the coronation of King Charles III will take place on Saturday, the 6th of May next year, with the Queen Consort crowned alongside him. The ceremony will be held at Westminster Abbey and will be led by the Archbishop of Canterbury. Our royal correspondent Nicholas Witchell reports.
He's been king since the moment of his mother's death. Charles was in Ballater near Balmoral today, thanking local people for their support over recent weeks. Alongside King Charles, Camilla, the Queen Consort. And they will be side by side in 7 months' time to be crowned alongside each other at the coronation.
And now, here comes Her Majesty.
In June 1953, Queen Elizabeth rode in a gold coach to her coronation.
Her Majesty moves to King Edward's chair.
It's an event which, while it's purely symbolic in constitutional terms, has a deep religious significance. It's the moment when a new monarch is crowned and consecrated, when a king or queen dedicates him or herself to the service of his or her people. For King Charles, the coronation will be a blend, ancient traditions with a contemporary feel. In a statement, Buckingham Palace said, the coronation will reflect the monarch's role today and look towards the future, while being rooted in long-standing traditions and pageantry.
Will Britain, at a time of homelessness and restricted benefits and energy prices going up, really cheer to the rafters the sight of a head of state riding in a golden coach? There are others who will say, that's just what we want.
Nearly 70 years after the grandeur of Queen Elizabeth's coronation, the crowning of King Charles and Queen Camilla will be shorter, smaller and more diverse. A coronation which, in the words of the new King's officials, will reflect the Britain and the world of today. And will there be a public holiday to celebrate? That's a matter for the government, says the palace. Nicholas Witchell, BBC News.
A court has been told that a nurse accused of murdering 7 babies was interrupted by the mother of one little boy when she arrived on the neonatal unit. 32-year-old Lucy Letby is accused of murdering 5 baby boys and 2 girls and attempting to murder 10 others at the Countess of Chester Hospital. She denies all the charges. Our North of England correspondent Judith Moritz reports from Manchester.
Lucy Letby was qualified to work with the sickest of babies, but it's alleged that instead of nursing them back to health, she attacked them in their cots and incubators in the special care unit. It's said that between June 2015 and June 2016, she targeted 17 babies on the neonatal ward of the Countess of Chester Hospital, where she worked. Today, the prosecution continued to open its case at Manchester Crown Court, detailing how each baby came to be attacked. And saying a pattern had emerged. Lucy Letby was the only nurse present every time. We aren't reporting the names of the babies or their parents because of a restriction imposed by court order. Instead, we're referring to them as babies A to Q. The jurors were told about twin brothers, babies E and F, born prematurely. They heard that one night their mother had gone from her bed on the postnatal ward to visit them on the neonatal unit. It was said that baby E was very distressed and bleeding from his mouth, and that without realising it, she'd interrupted Lucy Letby, who was in the process of murdering her son. Leading the prosecution, Nick Johnson KC said the mother recalls Lucy Letby attempting to reassure her that the blood was due to the tube irritating his throat. The jury heard that Lucy Letby urged the baby's mother to return to her own bed, as if to say, "Trust me, I'm a nurse." Baby E died that night, and the following day it's alleged Lucy Letby tried unsuccessfully to murder his twin brother. The jury's also been told that the nurse tried to kill another baby, baby G, 3 times. The little girl survived, but is now severely disabled with irreversible brain damage. It's been claimed that Lucy Letby had a very unusual interest in many of the baby's parents, searching for them repeatedly on Facebook. The nurse denies all the charges she faces. The case will continue tomorrow. Judith Moritz, BBC News, Manchester.
The time is 6:15, our top story this evening. Another turbulent day on the financial markets amid more warnings, including from the Bank of England, about the UK's economy.
And still to come, I'm at Hampden, where Scotland women must win against Ireland if they're to get to the World Cup. Wales have just kicked off in their playoff final.
And coming up in Sports Day on the BBC News Channel, Wales are on the brink of history as they look to qualify for the Women's World Cup for the very first time. Scotland also closing in on a place in the finals.
Russia has launched missile strikes on Ukrainian cities for a second day. The United Nations says the latest attacks appear to have targeted civilian infrastructure and could therefore amount to war crimes. World leaders meeting today as part of the G7 group have confirmed their commitment to provide military and economic aid for Ukraine for as long as it takes. Paul Adams has the latest from Kyiv.
In Kyiv, a day of welcome calm after yesterday's storm. Air raid sirens did sound briefly, citizens heeding their government's warning to seek shelter, some heading for the metro.
We don't feel safe because we don't know what's coming next. Nevertheless, I hope that what happened yesterday was the scariest thing.
I'm not afraid because there will be victory for Ukraine, Ukrainians, for all our people.
One of yesterday's missiles almost hit the city's famous pedestrian bridge. Today, after getting the all clear, people came out to see what almost happened.
This popular bridge isn't just a tourist attraction anymore, it's now what the mayor calls a symbol of Ukraine's indomitability. But while the people of this city have had a pretty quiet day on which to reflect on yesterday's events, it hasn't been the same in other parts of the country.
In the southern city of Zaporizhia, a car showroom was gutted early this morning. Officials said 12 missiles were fired at the city. Zaporizhia has been hit almost every day for the past 2 weeks. Officials in other cities have been ordered not to release images of damage to power plants and other infrastructure. With winter coming, they know energy is a key Russian target. This afternoon, President Zelensky directly appealed to allies for help in dealing with missiles and drones. He thanked them for helping to secure Ukraine's skies, but said the threats kept coming and Ukraine needed more. Back in the capital, the cleanup continues. The government has told people here to be vigilant and conserve energy. In this war with many fronts, keeping warm may soon become the next battle. Paul Adams, BBC News, Kyiv.
The head of the UK's GCHQ spy agency says Ukraine is turning the tide against Russian forces. Sir Jeremy Fleming says Russia is running out of both ammunition and troops, but he warned against complacency, saying Russia was still very capable of causing damage. Our security correspondent Frank Gardner has more.
Britain's biggest spy agency, GCHQ, is watching carefully the war in Ukraine. Without disclosing his sources, its Director General believes Russia is running out of weapons.
We know, and Russian military commanders know,
that their supplies and munition are running out. Russia's forces are exhausted. The use of prisoners as reinforcements and now the mobilization of tens of thousands of inexperienced conscripts speaks of a really desperate situation.
Ukraine has been coming under sustained Russian missile attack from several directions, from the sea, from the air, and across borders. The Kalibr cruise missile is one of Russia's most valuable precision-guided weapons, and it's almost certainly running low on these. Fired from a warship or a submarine, it can deliver a 500-kilogram warhead to a target hundreds of kilometers away with great accuracy. Other weapons, though, are blunter. Like this S-300 missile. Designed to shoot down aircraft, it's being used against built-up areas in cities all across Ukraine. Then there are these low-tech tube-launched rockets, many of them dating from the Soviet era. Not very accurate and prone to failure, but Russia has a lot of them. So what evidence is there that we can access from open sources that Russia might be running low on weapons like these?
We know, for example, that the manufacturing rates of missiles like the 3M14 Kalibr, Russia's more modern cruise missile, were around 100 a year on average before the war began. And given that Russia's used over 2,000 cruise and ballistic missiles over the course of this war, its stockpiles are probably dwindling.
But that's little consolation to those on the receiving end of these weapons. The more success Ukraine has on the battlefield, the more Russia inflicts punishment on the civilian population. Frank Gardner, BBC News.
A look now at some other stories making the news today. The prime suspect in the disappearance of Madeleine McCann has been charged in Germany with unrelated sexual offences. Christian Bruckner, who's a convicted sex offender, is accused of 5 offences between 2000 and 2017 in Portugal. German prosecutors say the investigation into her disappearance is ongoing separately. The funerals have taken place of 2 victims of the explosion that killed 10 people in County Donegal. Masses were held at St Michael's Church in the village for Jessica Gallagher, who was 24 years old, and 49-year-old Martin McGill. An investigation into the cause of the explosion is taking place, but police say it appears to have been an accident. Funerals have been taking place in Thailand for those who were killed, many of them children, when a former policeman went on a shooting rampage at a nursery last week. 37 people died in what is one of the worst mass killings in the country's history. US prosecutors have dropped all charges against a man from Baltimore whose case garnered worldwide attention through the hit true crime podcast Serial, which cast doubt on his guilt. Adnan Syed served 23 years in prison after he was convicted of the murder of his ex-girlfriend, Hae Min Lee. His conviction was quashed last month. The UK's highest court has been asked to decide whether the Scottish Parliament can hold another independence referendum without the agreement of the Westminster Government. Scotland's First Minister Nicola Sturgeon wants to have another vote next year, but Downing Street objects. Our Scotland editor, James Cook, is here now. James.
Yes, Sophie. Well, the first vote on independence was held on the 18th of September 2014 after Downing Street decided that Holyrood could have the power to hold it. Then 55% of voters said no and 45% yes. But since then, we've had Brexit, which a majority of Scottish voters did not back. The SNP are still the largest party at Holyrood, and a majority of MSPs now want another vote on independence on the 19th of October next year. This time, though, the Scottish Government, well, it says no. And so the political row has become a legal dispute here at the Supreme Court in London about whether or not Holyrood has the power to hold a referendum anyway. The Scottish Government, what's its view? Well, it argues that it's in the public interest to settle the matter. On the other hand, the UK Government says the case is abstract, hypothetical and premature. The 5 judges could take several months to issue their ruling, and if they do say no to a second vote, then Scotland's First Minister Nicola Sturgeon has another plan. She says she'll go to the people and treat the next general election as an independence referendum. Her opponents say they simply wouldn't accept that. But with the polls on independence split more or less down the middle, This issue looks set to dominate Scottish politics for years to come, whatever, Sophie, the judges decide.
James, thank you. The chefs, Jamie Oliver and Tom Kerridge, are among the famous faces calling on the government to allow children from all families in England on universal credit to have free school meals. Jamie Oliver says extending the scheme would save households money and help to boost the economy. But ministers say using universal credit is not the best measure for finding out who might need more help. Our Midlands correspondent Phil Mackey reports from Birmingham.
Lunchtime at Cockshut Hill School, and not everyone can afford all they want. Jamie Oliver would be pleased with the quality of what's on offer, but he'd also want fewer of these children's parents to have to pay. Currently, in England, if your household income is more than £7,400 a year after tax and before benefits, your children aren't entitled to a free school meal.
There's a massive gap between the means test for free school lunches as it stands and universal credit. And I think, you know, what the government are saying is universal credit tethers off and can go up to sort of 30, 40 grand. But really, we're talking about the bulk of them being around £14,000 per household.
This is Noor. She works 2 hours a day as a lunchtime supervisor. Her husband works in a call centre and they have 3 children. They're on universal credit.
If it's like for us, yeah, it is a lot. At least they can have everyday fresh school meal. So it should go free school meal for us who is low income or people who have no jobs or looking for the jobs or really, really low income. It should for them.
To give you an idea of how things might change, this school's got around 1,000 children, of whom half are currently eligible for free school meals. If it were extended to every family who's on universal credit, that number would jump by at least another 20%. The school already provides free breakfasts for around 150 children a day and is about to provide a third meal after school for those who need it.
I believe we are in a crisis with many, many families, but I think there's much more that can be done, and this level of government support that Jamie Oliver's talking about would be a huge help to that.
But the government doesn't think it would be the fairest solution.
I'm aware that people could be earning over £40,000 and still be on universal credit. I think it's important support is targeted. I'm not aware of any further changes that are being proposed to what happens today.
The problem is the government may not have enough money either if it has to foot the bill for more free school meals. Phil Mackey, BBC News, Birmingham.
Football now, and both Wales and Scotland women have the chance to qualify for the World Cup tonight. Wales are playing Switzerland while Scotland take on the Republic of Ireland in their playoff finals. But a win won't guarantee a place at next year's tournament. Jane Dougal is at Hampden Park for us. It's not straightforward, is it?
It's not, Sophie, but putting it simply, both Scotland women and Wales women have to win tonight, otherwise they are out. And they also have to hope that other results go their way. Now, Wales are playing Switzerland in Zurich as we speak, and after 25 minutes, it's 1-0 to Wales. Wales women have never qualified for a major tournament before, so this is pretty nerve-wracking for them. As for Scotland, well, they take on the Republic of Ireland here at Hampden in the later match. Again, they will have to win if they stand any chance of getting to the World Cup. It is expected to be another record crowd for a competitive women's match here. But even if Scotland and Wales do win their matches, neither are guaranteed a place at the World Cup. There are 3 playoff matches tonight. 2 of the winners will automatically get through, but that's only dependent upon their rankings. The 3rd winner will have to go to another playoff, which will take place in February in New Zealand. So it is complicated, but if it means getting to a World Cup, worth it. Sophie.
Jane, thank you. Time now for a look at the weather. Nick Miller is here. There was some lovely sunshine this morning.
Yeah, what a gorgeous start to the day. In fact, I have a view of that here from one of our weather watchers in Surrey this morning. Autumn has 2 sides to it, really. It's the chilly, bright, quiet side to autumn. That's what many of us had first thing this morning. There's even a bit of frost in parts of southern England again this morning. There is the other side to autumn. That's the windier side, of course, and that's going to come back later this week and into the weekend. Now, after that fine start this morning with the sunshine, many places towards the north and west of the UK have clouded over, as you can see. We've got some outbreaks of rain beginning to move in, particularly across parts of Northern Ireland and western Scotland. Here's what's doing that. An area of low pressure that's well to our north, but the trailing weather front comes down into us and across us as we go through the next 24 hours or so. It is Northern Ireland and Scotland getting into some of that rain as we get on into tonight. Glasgow will see the rain, some heavier rain at that as well, but not really until the match is finished, and that's after midnight. Some patchy rain to northwest England, parts of Wales later in the night. Now, it is a mild night for many. For East Anglia and the South East, clear enough for long enough overnight. Again, for temperatures to fall quite close to freezing in a few spots before a cloudier but mainly dry day tomorrow. It'll be the evening before any rain gets in here, whereas elsewhere in England and Wales, cloudier, breezier, some outbreaks of rain slowly moving south, clearing from Scotland and Northern Ireland as it brightens up here, and you may catch a shower, though most places won't. Ahead of this area of patchy showery rain, up to around 18 degrees in London, behind it around 15 in Aberdeen. Here's a look at tomorrow evening then. Again, some patchy rain reaching towards the southeast, elsewhere clearing up, and that does mean a chilly, bright, quiet start on Thursday morning, maybe a touch of frost across northern areas. And then on Thursday, southern England may see a little rain, northern extent uncertain, and another weather system feeding some rain back in towards northern and western parts of Scotland. Now, I mentioned that other side of autumn weather, and that's the windier side. By Friday, the wind picks up across all areas. There'll be sunny spells for many, some heavy showers into western Scotland, and it's blustery across the UK this weekend. There'll be rain or showers around, not all the time though. There'll be some sunnier moments too. Sophie.
Nick, thank you. And that's all from the BBC News at 6. The news continues here on BBC One. It's now time to join our colleagues across the nations and regions for the news where you are. Goodbye.